Welcome to HFY Aliens Battle, where humanity proves, time and time again, that we are not to be underestimated. If you love stories of human resilience, bravery, and defiance against overwhelming odds, you're in the right place. Subscribe now to HFY Aliens Battle and never miss a fight for humanity's survival. Hit the bell icon so you're always ready for the next battle. Now let's dive into today's story. Humanity's Last War, the final battle for the universe. The first sign of humanity's return. A galaxy that had given up. The Dominion was dying. The warlords had spent years trying to erase humanity's influence. Now, they begged for their return. They had ruled through power, deception, and treachery. But against this enemy, none of it mattered. Entire fleets vanished. Planets, entire star systems were erased from existence. There was no defense, no way to fight back. The warlords tried to surrender. The enemy did not accept, because it was not here to conquer. It was here to end everything. And so, the Dominion sent one last message into the void. A plea for salvation. A desperate attempt to call back the ones they had betrayed. But no one expected an answer. No one believed humanity was still watching. And yet, somewhere far beyond the known galaxy, humanity was listening. A fleet that should not exist. At the edge of Dominion space, a battle was already lost. A warlord's fleet, one of the last great armadas, stood in orbit around Veldar Prime. Once, it had been a fortress world. Now, it was just another grave. The enemy had come, and it had come without warning. Their ships did not appear on sensors. Their weapons did not fire projectiles. Instead, they reached into space itself, bending reality, ripping ships apart from the inside. No explosions, no wreckage, just unmaking. One by one, the warlords' ships vanished. And then, something changed. A presence entered the battlefield. Not Dominion reinforcements. Not more enemy war forms. Something else. Something impossible. Something that should not exist. A single warship. Its hull, black as the void itself. Its size, far beyond any known class of vessel. It did not transmit a signal. It did not broadcast an allegiance. It simply arrived. And then the war changed. The first strike. The enemy reacted immediately. It had adapted to every weapon, every tactic, every fleet thrown at it. But this was new. It turned its reality-breaking weapons on the warship. It tried to erase it, like it had erased thousands of ships before. But this time, it failed. The unknown warship did not vanish. It did not break. It simply ignored the attack. And then, it fired back. A single pulse of energy erupted from its hull. Not plasma, not light. Something deeper, something older, something that reached into the core of the enemy itself. The first enemy ship froze in place. Then, it collapsed inward. Not destroyed, not vaporized, but turned against itself. Its very matter ripped apart from the inside. And for the first time, the enemy hesitated. A transmission from a void. The warlords watched in stunned silence. The impossible had just happened. The enemy had been stopped. Not by the Dominion. Not by any known force. But by something else. And then, a transmission came through. Not from the Dominion fleet. Not from the enemy. From a warship. A voice cold, unwavering. A voice the galaxy had not heard in centuries. You have 15 seconds to retreat. The warlords froze. They knew that voice. They had feared that voice. But they didn't have time to question it. Because the enemy realized what was happening. And it attacked. The second wave. The warship did not move. The enemy, now fully aware of the threat before it, launched everything it had. Reality-bending weapons. Singularity implosions. Time reversal bombardments. Attacks that had unmade entire species before. And yet, none of them touched the warship. It simply existed beyond them. Beyond the rules. Beyond their understanding. And then, the warship fired again. This time, it didn't just erase one enemy ship. It erased all of them. A single wave of energy swept across the battlefield. Where once there had been dozens of enemy war forms, there was nothing. Not wreckage. Not debris. Not even empty space. It was as if they had never been there at all. And then the transmission came again. You were warned. Leave this system. You do not belong in this war. The warlords, terrified, turned their ships away and fled. Because they knew this was not a rescue mission. This was not humanity coming to save them. This was something worse. Humanity had returned, and it no longer considered them allies. A message to the galaxy. The warlords sent out a warning to the rest of the Dominion. They had seen something impossible. They had seen humanity's return, but not as rulers, not as conquerors, as executioners. And for the first time, the galaxy truly understood. Humanity had not left them behind. They had let them suffer. And now, they would decide who deserved to exist and who would be erased. The Supreme Commander's orders. On the bridge of the largest human warship ever constructed, the Supreme Commander stood in silence. The battle was over. The warlords had fled. The enemy had been repelled. But this was only the beginning. Humanity had returned not to protect the Dominion, not to reclaim their throne, but to finish what had been started, to end the war before it could spread any further. And that meant only one thing. They would hunt the enemy to the very edge of existence, and they would erase it permanently. The Supreme Commander gave the next order. Deploy the First Strike Fleet. Let the galaxy know we are here. And this time, we're not leaving until the war is over. And with that, humanity's war machine activated, and the final battle for the universe had begun. The battle for the last stronghold, the Dominion's last line of defense. The galaxy had fractured. The Dominion was no longer an empire. It was a collection of warlords, each fighting for control of the ruins. But one world remained untouched. One planet had never fallen. Icarus Prime, the last stronghold of the Old Dominion. A fortress world, hidden within layers of artificial storms and gravitational traps. A place where the greatest weapons, the most advanced defenses, and the last of the loyal Dominion fleets had gathered. It was their final hope. If it fell, there would be nothing left. And now, the enemy had come for it. And this time, there would be no escape. The first wave. The enemy did not announce itself. It did not send a demand for surrender. It simply appeared. Massive, dark vessels flickered into reality, warping through dimensions like phantoms. There were no energy readings, no life signs, no heat signatures, just an unstoppable wave of nothingness. And when they struck, they did not fire weapons. They simply unmade. Entire defense platforms disappeared. Shield generators vanished. The outer orbital defenses, designed to withstand planetary bombardments, simply ceased to exist. And on the surface, the warlords finally understood. This was not a battle. This was extermination. And they were already losing. The desperate defense. The Dominion fleets scrambled. Massive warships, hundreds of kilometers long, rose from their hidden bunkers. Planetary defense cannons, the size of cities, fired into orbit. Every weapon, every strategy, everything they had ever known, failed. The enemy was beyond tactics, beyond warfare. It was something that should not exist. And now it was coming for them. The warlords gave their final order. If we are to die, we die as warriors. And so, they launched their entire fleet. Thousands of ships, billions of soldiers. They threw everything they had at the enemy. It did not matter. The Void did not care. The enemy's ships did not take damage. Their warforms moved through solid matter like ghosts. And one by one, the Dominion ships were erased. It was over. Icarus Prime had fallen. The last stronghold was about to be wiped from existence. And then, something changed. A tear in the sky. Space itself shattered. A black fissure ripped through the battlefield, splitting through reality like a wound. And from it, something emerged. Not the enemy, not the Dominion. Something else. Something stronger. A fleet unlike any before. Ships darker than the void itself, burning with a strange, impossible energy. Ships that did not appear on scanners. Ships that should not exist. And yet, here they were. Humanity had arrived. And this time, they were not here to negotiate. The first strike. The enemy turned to face the new arrival. It recognized the threat. It knew humanity had returned. And for the first time, it adjusted its strategy. But humanity had been waiting for this moment. The first human ships did not fire weapons. Instead, they unleashed something worse. A ripple in reality. A wave of energy that did not destroy. It rewrote. The enemy ships, which had once adapted to every weapon, suddenly froze. Their forms shuddered. For the first time, they could not evolve. For the first time, they were losing. Because humanity had not just returned stronger. They had returned with something the enemy had never encountered before. An answer to their existence. A weapon designed not to kill them, but to erase them from history itself. And as the first wave of enemy ships collapsed, the Supreme Commander spoke. You should have left us alone. The human counterattack. The battle shifted instantly. The enemy, once unstoppable, now hesitated. It tried to adapt, tried to rewrite itself. But humanity had already seen this strategy before, and they were faster. The Dominion's battered fleets watched in awe as the human warships tore through the enemy like they were nothing. Weapons that did not fire energy, but manipulated existence itself. Ships that did not dodge attacks, but moved in ways that ignored time and space. It was no longer a fight. It was a massacre. And in less than an hour, the enemy fleet was gone. Icarus Prime had been saved, but not by the Dominion, by the ones they had betrayed. And now, they had to face the truth. A reckoning for the warlords. The Supreme Commander's flagship descended into orbit. The remaining warlords, those who had survived the battle, were brought before them, their eyes filled with fear. For years, they had tried to erase humanity. Now, they stood before the ones they had cast out, and they knew this was not a moment of mercy. The Supreme Commander's voice was cold, absolute. You thought we would not return. A pause. You thought we would let you fall. Silence. Then, you were wrong. The warlords knelt, not out of loyalty, not out of respect, but out of fear, because they had seen the truth. Humanity had returned, and they were not here to save them. They were here to decide who would be erased, and who would be allowed to live. The next step in the war. Icarus Prime was safe, but the war was not over. The enemy was regrouping. It had learned from this battle, and it would return stronger. Humanity knew this was only the beginning. The Supreme Commander gave the next order. Prepare the invasion fleet. A pause. A final command. We are done waiting. And just like that, the human war machine moved forward. Not to defend, not to hold the line, but to end the war. Permanently. The first sign of humanity's return. A galaxy that had given up. The Dominion was dying. The warlords had spent years trying to erase humanity's influence. Now, they begged for their return. They had ruled through power, deception, and treachery. But against this enemy, none of it mattered. Entire fleets vanished. Planets, entire star systems were erased from existence. There was no defense, no way to fight back. The warlords tried to surrender. The enemy did not accept, because it was not here to conquer. It was here to end everything. And so, the Dominion sent one last message into the void. A plea for salvation. A desperate attempt to call back the ones they had betrayed. But no one expected an answer. No one believed humanity was still watching. And yet, somewhere far beyond the known galaxy, humanity was listening. A fleet that should not exist. At the edge of Dominion space, a battle was already lost. A warlord's fleet, one of the last great armadas, stood in orbit around Veldar Prime. Once, it had been a fortress world. Now, it was just another grave. The enemy had come, and it had come without warning. Their ships did not appear on sensors. Their weapons did not fire projectiles. Instead, they reached into space itself, bending reality, ripping ships apart from the inside. No explosions, no wreckage, just unmaking. One by one, the warlords' ships vanished. And then, something changed. A presence entered the battlefield. Not Dominion reinforcements. Not more enemy war forms. Something else. Something impossible. Something that should not exist. A single warship. Its hull, black as the void itself. Its size, far beyond any known class of vessel. It did not transmit a signal. It did not broadcast an allegiance. It simply arrived. And then, the war changed. The first strike, the enemy reacted immediately. It had adapted to every weapon every tactic, every fleet thrown at it. But this was new. It turned its reality-breaking weapons on the warship. It tried to erase it, like it had erased thousands of ships before. But this time, it failed. The unknown warship did not vanish. It did not break. It simply ignored the attack. And then, it fired back. A single pulse of energy erupted from its hull. Not plasma, not light. Something deeper, something older, something that reached into the core of the enemy itself. The first enemy ship froze in place. Then, it collapsed inward, not destroyed, not vaporized, but turned against itself. Its very matter ripped apart from the inside. And for the first time, the enemy hesitated. A transmission from the void. The warlords watched in stunned silence. The impossible had just happened. The enemy had been stopped, not by the Dominion, not by any known force, but by something else. And then, a transmission came through. Not from the Dominion fleet, not from the enemy, from the warship. A voice cold, unwavering. A voice the galaxy had not heard in centuries. You have 15 seconds to retreat. The warlords froze. They knew that voice. They had feared that voice. But they didn't have time to question it, because the enemy realized what was happening, and it attacked. The second wave. The warship did not move. The enemy, now fully aware of the threat before it, launched everything it had. Reality-bending weapons, singularity implosions, time reversal bombardments, attacks that had unmade entire species before. And yet, none of them touched the warship. It simply existed beyond them, beyond the rules, beyond their understanding. And then, the warship fired again. This time, it didn't just erase one enemy ship. It erased all of them. A single wave of energy swept across the battlefield. Where once there had been dozens of enemy warforms, there was nothing, not wreckage, not debris, not even empty space. It was as if they had never been there at all. And then, the transmission came again. You were warned. Leave this system. You do not belong in this war. The warlords, terrified, turned their ships away and fled. Because they knew this was not a rescue mission. This was not humanity coming to save them. This was something worse. Humanity had returned, and it no longer considered them allies. A message to the galaxy. The warlords sent out a warning to the rest of the Dominion. They had seen something impossible. They had seen humanity's return, but not as rulers, not as conquerors, as executioners. And for the first time, the galaxy truly understood. Humanity had not left them behind. They had let them suffer. And now they would decide who deserved to exist and who would be erased. The Supreme Commander's orders. On the bridge of the largest human warship ever constructed, the Supreme Commander stood in silence. The battle was over. The warlords had fled. The enemy had been repelled. But this was only the beginning. Humanity had returned not to protect the Dominion, not to reclaim their throne, but to finish what had been started, to end the war before it could spread any further. And that meant only one thing. They would hunt the enemy to the very edge of existence, and they would erase it permanently. The Supreme Commander gave the next order. Deploy the first strike fleet. Let the galaxy know we are here. And this time, we are not leaving until the war is over. And with that, humanity's war machine activated, and the final battle for the universe had begun. Humanity's new arsenal, the ultimate weapons, a new kind of warfare. The warlords of the Dominion had seen many battles. They had fought against rebel factions. They had crushed uprisings. They had even waged wars against other galactic empires. But they had never seen anything like this. Because what they had just witnessed was not war. It was something beyond it. Humanity had returned, and they were using weapons that defied reality itself. Weapons that did not destroy, but erased. And for the first time, the warlords understood. They had not seen the true power of humanity. They had only seen the beginning, the weapon that cannot be countered. In the past, the Dominion had studied every weapon humanity had ever created. They had stolen ship designs, energy cannons, planetary siege weapons. They had reverse-engineered what they could. But now, they realized something terrifying. Humanity had been holding back. The Supreme Commander stood before the warlords inside a towering command chamber, surrounded by holographic displays of the next phase of the war. And then, they activated the first demonstration, a recording of the last battle. The Dominion warlords watched in stunned silence, because the weapons humanity had unleashed were impossible. The Omega-patterned warships. The first thing they saw was the warships. Not metallic, not synthetic, but alive. Ships that moved with intelligence, reshaping themselves in real time. Their hulls were not armored in conventional materials. They were layered in self-adapting quantum constructs. Every time the enemy had tried to counter them, the ships had rewritten their own structure. Every attack phased through them. Every strategy failed before it could even be executed. The Dominion had spent centuries trying to mimic human technology. But this was something else entirely. The reality-breaking arsenal. Then, the warlords saw the true horror. Humanity had stopped using conventional weapons. Their new arsenal ignored the laws of physics. Chrono-pulse disruptors. Weapons that did not fire energy or projectiles, but instead canceled moments of time. Ships caught in the blast simply ceased to exist, as if they had never been built. Graviton collapse mines. Fields of artificial gravity wells, crushing enemy vessels into points smaller than atoms. Ships that tried to escape were simply absorbed into non-existence. Omega singularity torpedoes. Living warheads that adapted in flight. When enemy ships tried to block them, the torpedoes shifted their own frequency, bypassing defenses. They did not explode. They imploded their targets from within. The warlords couldn't comprehend it. Weapons like these weren't just powerful. They were unstoppable. And then, the Supreme Commander delivered the final revelation. The Leviathans, the unseen forces of humanity. The holographic display shifted, and the warlords gasped, because for the first time, they saw what had been hidden until now. A new type of weapon, one that did not move in fleets, one that did not require ships, one that had been watching the war from the shadows. The Leviathans, gigantic war forms, nearly the size of planets themselves. They were not crude. They were not piloted. They were sentient constructs created by humanity's exiled scientists, beings of pure, weaponized intelligence. The Supreme Commander spoke, their voice calm but absolute. These are our final weapons. They do not think as you do. They do not fight as you do. They exist for one purpose. A pause, and then, to finish the war. The enemy's first encounter with the Leviathans. Far beyond Dominion space, in a system that had already been claimed by the enemy, something changed. The enemy's ships halted. For the first time, they detected something. Something they could not comprehend. A presence unlike any fleet, any empire, any civilization. A Leviathan had arrived. It did not have weapons in the traditional sense. It did not have shields. It simply existed. The enemy tried to erase it, tried to turn reality against it. But the Leviathan did not follow the same rules, because it was not bound to reality. It was reality, and then it attacked, not with energy, not with matter, but with something else, something the enemy could not counter. It restructured the enemy at the atomic level. It turned their own ships against them, and in a matter of seconds, the enemy vanished, not destroyed, not broken, erased. For the first time, the war had truly shifted. Humanity had revealed its greatest weapons, and the enemy had no answer. The Supreme Commander's final order. The Dominion warlords stood in silence. They had once thought themselves the greatest force in the galaxy. Now they saw the truth. Humanity was beyond them, beyond anything they had ever imagined. The Supreme Commander watched them with unreadable eyes. Then they issued the next command. Deploy the Leviathans. A pause. We are no longer fighting a war. We are ending one. And with that, the final phase of humanity's return had begun. The Dominion was no longer the dominant force in the galaxy. It was no longer even a factor, because now, the true war was about to start, and nothing would be left unchanged. The enemy's true form is revealed. The silence before the storm. The enemy had never lost before. It had never known fear. For millions of years, it had moved through the universe unchecked, unchallenged, unstoppable. It had erased entire civilizations, consumed entire galaxies. And now, it had met resistance. Not from a weak, crumbling dominion. Not from a lesser species that barely understood war. But from humanity. And worse, humanity had countered them. For the first time, the enemy had failed to adapt. And now, it was changing its strategy. Because it finally understood something it never had before. This war would not be won with brute force. It would not be won with annihilation. It would be won by revealing what humanity feared most. And so, the enemy revealed its true form. And the war changed forever. The shifting war front. After humanity's first major counterattack, the enemy did something unexpected. It stopped attacking. Its forces withdrew from every battlefield. Its fleets vanished from known space. The Leviathans, now deployed across multiple sectors, found nothing to fight. The Supreme Commander watched the data feeds, silent. They knew what this meant. The enemy was no longer fighting conventionally. It had learned. It was waiting, and that meant only one thing. It was preparing to strike in a way humanity could not predict. The fractured reality event. It started in deep space, a region of the galaxy far from any known stronghold. There were no battleships nearby, no human outposts, no Dominion survivors, just empty, silent space. And then, the stars bent. Not physically, not through technology. Reality itself began to shift. Sensors picked up impossible readings. Time began to unstitch itself. Then, a new anomaly appeared. Not a ship, not a fleet. Something worse. Something humanity could not explain. And for the first time, the Supreme Commander felt something they had not felt in centuries. Uncertainty. The unthinkable happens. Before humanity could react, the anomaly expanded. Not outward, inward, collapsing in on itself, dragging all surrounding matter into a singularity that wasn't there. Planets vanished instantly. Stars snapped out of existence. Not destroyed, not erased, just gone, as if they had never been. And then, the message came through. Not in words, not in any known language, but in thought. A presence so vast, so incomprehensible, that even the Leviathans paused. It was not a fleet. It was not a species. It was something older than creation itself. And it had finally decided to speak. The enemy's true identity. The transmission did not ask for surrender. It did not threaten. It did not boast. Because it did not see humanity as an enemy. It saw them as a mistake. And its voice, if it could even be called a voice, was everywhere. You do not belong here. The Supreme Commander stood frozen. Not in fear, but in understanding. Because now, they knew what they were fighting. And it was worse than anything they had ever imagined. The enemy was not a species. It was not an empire. It was not even a singular being. It was the first force, the original force of uncreation. And it had existed before time itself, waiting, watching, ensuring that only one kind of existence could survive. And humanity was not part of it. The war becomes something else. The Supreme Commander did not respond. Because they knew now, this was no longer a war for survival. This was a battle between fundamental truths. A battle between existence and non-existence. The Leviathans shifted. They felt the presence, too. For the first time, they were not sure they could win. And that was when the enemy made its final declaration. You think you are strong. You think you have evolved. You have only delayed the inevitable. The fabric of space cracked open. And from the void beyond the universe, something began to emerge. Something even the Leviathans feared. Something humanity had never prepared for. And then, the message ended. The anomaly collapsed. And the enemy was gone. But not for long. The Supreme Commander's response. The war room was silent. Humanity's leaders did not know what to say. For the first time, they had no answers. Because how do you fight something that is beyond time? Beyond reality? Beyond the very fabric of existence itself? And then, the Supreme Commander spoke. Calm. Absolute. Prepare the final fleet. A pause. Then, they think they understand us. They don't. We are more than soldiers. We are more than survivors. We are the first species to ever defy them. A long silence followed. Then, the final command. Deploy the Omega Leviathans. And just like that, the final war had begun. The war for existence. This was no longer about who ruled the galaxy. No longer about who conquered who. This was about the final decision. Would reality continue, or would it be unmade? Humanity had one chance. One final battle to decide everything. And now they were ready. The Supreme Commander looked out over the vastness of space. They had spent millennia preparing. Now, there was no more waiting. This was it. And so, they gave the final order. We take the fight to them. We end this. And with that, the greatest war in the history of the universe truly began. The final war begins. The war that will decide everything. The time for planning was over. The time for strategy had passed. This was not a battle for power. This was not a fight for survival. This was the final war. And only one side would remain. Either humanity's existence would continue, or everything that had ever been would be erased. There would be no surrender, no negotiations, no retreat. And so, the greatest fleet in history prepared to launch. And with it, humanity's last hope. The Omega Leviathans awakened. For centuries, humanity had built weapons. For thousands of years, they had perfected warfare. But the Omega Leviathans were not weapons. They were something more. Not machines, not ships, not artificial intelligence. They were a fusion of human consciousness and engineered divinity. They were beings designed to counter the very forces that unmade reality. And now they would be unleashed. The Dominion warlords, watching from the shattered remains of their empire, could only stare in horror, because what they saw was no longer human. It was something greater, something beyond them. And as the Omega Leviathans activated, their forms shifting and bending across dimensions, the galaxy itself trembled. Because for the first time, humanity had built something capable of fighting gods. The battlefield beyond reality. The war would not be fought in known space. It would not be fought on planets in solar systems or in the void between stars. Because the enemy did not exist in those places. It existed beyond them, beyond time, beyond space. And so, the final fleet prepared for the impossible, to enter a battlefield that was not bound to the laws of physics. A war front where cause and effect meant nothing, where death was not an end, but a rewriting of history itself. And the Supreme Commander gave the final order. Begin the incursion, the leap into the abyss. The human fleet did not travel in the way ships normally moved. They did not use faster-than-light drives. They did not use hyperspace corridors. They simply vanished. And when they reappeared, they were no longer in the universe. The Dominion warlords, watching from the safety of their crumbling empire, lost all contact with humanity's final fleet. And to them, it seemed as if humanity had simply ceased to exist. But they were wrong. Humanity was still very much alive. But they had entered a place where nothing had ever been alive before. And now, they had to fight. The first contact in the void. It did not take long. The enemy had been waiting. And as soon as humanity crossed the threshold into the unknown, it attacked. But it did not strike with weapons. It did not fire upon them. Instead, it tried to erase them from history. It reached backward, trying to rewrite the moment of their departure, trying to make it so that they had never left in the first place. But humanity had prepared for this. The Omega Leviathans, already existing in multiple states of reality, countered instantly. They held the timeline together. And for the first time, the enemy's most powerful ability failed. For the first time, something resisted uncreation. And that meant one thing. Humanity had a chance to win. The war of concepts begins. This was not a war of strategy, not a war of tactics. This was a war of existence itself. And so, the battle changed. Humanity did not fire weapons, because weapons meant nothing here. Instead, they rewrote themselves, adapting in real time, evolving beyond anything even the enemy could comprehend. And the enemy struggled to keep up, because for the first time, it was fighting something that evolved faster than it could erase. And that meant humanity was winning. But it would not be that easy, because then the enemy revealed its final form. The birth of the Unmaker. The enemy had never needed a form before. It had always been a force, a presence, a concept. But now it had to fight. And so it became something real, a manifestation of the void, a being that had no beginning and no end. Its form was not fixed. It shifted between possibilities, an endless cascade of realities overlapping. And when it moved, entire galaxies ceased to exist. It was not a weapon. It was the final answer to existence itself. And its purpose was clear. Erase humanity. Erase the war. Erase everything. And so, the final battle truly began. The final order. The Supreme Commander watched the Unmaker. Watched as it tore through existence like it was nothing. Watched as it tried to unmake everything that had ever been. And they did not hesitate. Because humanity had not come to run. Not this time. They had come to finish what was started. The Supreme Commander spoke, their voice echoing across all dimensions, all timelines, all realities. We are humanity. You forced us to evolve. Now, you will see what that means. A pause. A single breath before the end. Erase this. And then, the final attack began. The war that had lasted since the beginning of time would finally end. The last betrayal, the Dominion's cowards. The war humanity left behind. While humanity waged its final war beyond reality, the Dominion warlords watched from the ruins of their former empire. They had seen the human fleet vanish into the void, entering a battlefield that no other species had ever witnessed. And for the first time, they felt relief. Not because they believed humanity would win, not because they believed the war would end, but because, for the first time in centuries, they were alone. No human oversight. No Supreme Commander watching their every move. No power holding them accountable. The Dominion had been born from human rule. Now, with humanity gone, it was time to take back what was once theirs. Or so they thought. The rise of the Dominion's traitors. The first act of betrayal came within days. One warlord, a self-proclaimed emperor, declared that humanity was never coming back. That the galaxy belonged to those who remained. And so, the Dominion fleets, what was left of them, began their own war. Not against the enemy, not against the void, against each other. The warlords saw humanity's absence as an opportunity. They no longer feared retribution. They believed the Leviathans, the war machines that once patrolled human space, were gone. And so, the fleets turned on one another. The Dominion, once the largest empire in the galaxy, collapsed into chaos. The warlords began to erase humanity's legacy, destroying archives, wiping human technology from their systems, declaring that the age of humanity was over, that it was time for the lesser species to rule. But they had made one fatal mistake. They believed humanity was gone. They were wrong. A silent watcher in the dark. The Dominion warlords gathered their fleets in the Daxos system, one of the last strategic locations still intact. They celebrated their new era. They declared themselves the rulers of the galaxy. And as their new banners rose, as their forces mobilized to claim the last remnants of human-controlled space, they received a transmission, not from the enemy, not from one of their own, but from something else. A single message, a voice they had tried to erase. We are watching. Silence fell across their war rooms. For the first time, the warlords felt true fear. Because that voice did not belong to a Dominion officer. It did not belong to a rival warlord. It belonged to the Supreme Commander of humanity. And that meant only one thing. Humanity was still here, and they had seen everything. The second arrival of the Leviathans. Before the warlords could respond, before they could issue new orders, space itself ripped apart. Not like a fleet jumping in, not like a battle formation appearing from hyperspace, but like reality itself being rewritten. The Leviathans had returned, and they were not here to defend. They were not here to save the Dominion. They were here to punish it. The warlords panicked. They had assumed the Leviathans had vanished with the rest of the human fleet. But they hadn't. They had simply been watching, waiting. And now, the punishment was here. The judgment of humanity. The Supreme Commander's fleet had entered a war beyond existence. But humanity had not forgotten the traitors they left behind. They had given the Dominion one chance, one moment to redeem themselves, to stand with them, to fight for the right to exist. And instead, the warlords had betrayed them again. And so, the Supreme Commander had made their decision. There would be no more second chances. The Dominion had chosen its fate. And now, humanity wouldn't force it. The erasure begins. The warlords scrambled to counter the Leviathans. They activated their planetary defenses. They sent their fleets into formation. But the Leviathans did not engage. They simply hovered in the void, watching. And then, the first erasure field was activated. It started slow. One by one, ships began to disappear. Not destroyed, not attacked, just gone. The Dominion warlords screamed for answers. They demanded to know who was attacking them. And the response was brutal. A final message from the Supreme Commander. You wanted a galaxy without us. Now, you will see what that means. The fall of the warlords. The war had only lasted an hour. In that time, 12 warlords vanished. Not assassinated, not executed, simply removed from history. The Dominion fleets tried to escape, tried to rally against the unseen threat. But the Leviathans were beyond them. And in the end, there was no war, no battle, only judgment. The Dominion had collapsed, not by enemy invasion, not by rebellion, but because humanity had decided it no longer deserved to exist. And with that, the Dominion was no more. Not as an empire, not as a power, not as a memory, only a warning to every species that remained. The final message to the galaxy. With the Dominion gone, the Leviathans left. They did not claim territory. They did not set up new rulers. They simply disappeared. And as they did, a single transmission echoed across the remains of the galaxy. One last declaration. One last truth. This war was never yours to fight. You were never meant to rule. Stay out of our way. The meaning was clear. The warlords had believed they could rise above humanity, but they could survive without them. They had been proven wrong. And now, the rest of the galaxy had learned the lesson. Humanity was no longer their overlord. There was something else, something beyond rulers. They were the final power, and nothing, not the Dominion, not the lesser species, not even time itself, could stand against them. The war continues, but the war was not over. The true enemy, the Unmaker, was still out there, still waiting, still watching, and humanity was still fighting it. The final battle was yet to be decided, and the question remained, would humanity win? Would they erase the Unmaker? Or was this their last stand? The fate of existence itself hung in the balance. And soon, the answer would come, because the final war was reaching its end, and one way or another, something would cease to exist. The final stand at the edge of reality, the threshold of the unknown. The galaxy was silent. The Dominion was gone. The warlords who had betrayed humanity had been erased. The Leviathans had withdrawn. And now, the final battle was all that remained. Humanity had pushed beyond the edge of existence, into a place where time did not flow, where matter did not hold form, where the laws of physics meant nothing. This was the Unmaker's domain. And now, humanity had brought the war to it, the battlefield that wasn't there. The Supreme Commander stood aboard the Omega flagship, gazing at the impossible. They had fought wars across galaxies, conquered enemies who thought themselves gods, erased threats that had never known defeat. But this was something else. The Unmaker's domain was not a place. It was a concept, a vast, shifting abyss of possibilities collapsing in on themselves. They were not just fighting a force. They were fighting the end of all things. And now, the end had taken form. The true shape of the Unmaker. The first thing humanity saw was nothing. Not darkness, not emptiness, but a complete void. Then, the Unmaker manifested, not as a fleet, not as a being, but as a shape that could not be comprehended. A twisting, impossible structure of energy and thought, rewriting itself infinitely. It did not speak. It did not threaten, because it did not need to. It had no need for conquest, no need for revenge. It existed for only one reason: to unmake. And now humanity was next. The first strike. The Omega fleet moved first. Humanity had spent centuries preparing. They had studied the laws of existence. They had developed weapons that bent reality. And now they fired. The first assault wave struck the Unmaker's form. Chronopulse disruptors. Omega singularity torpedoes. Weapons that had unmade entire civilizations. And yet, nothing happened. The Unmaker absorbed the attack. Not by defending, not by countering, but by rewriting the moment as if it had never occurred. And then, it struck back. The collapse begins. The first Omega warship vanished. Not destroyed, not damaged, simply removed from existence. The Supreme Commander felt it happen. A hole in reality where a warship had once been. And then, another, and another. The Unmaker was not fighting back. It was simply removing its opposition, erasing them from the timeline. And in mere moments, a third of the Omega fleet was gone. Humanity was losing. The Omega Leviathans entered the fight. The Supreme Commander did not hesitate. The Leviathans were waiting, and now it was time to unleash them. Activate the Omega Protocol. The order was given, and the Leviathans moved. For the first time, they fully revealed themselves. Beings beyond human understanding. Constructs of pure, conscious will. They did not fire weapons. They did not deploy fleets. Instead, they countered the Unmaker directly, by rewriting existence against it, by forcing the concept of humanity upon a force that had never known it. And the Unmaker reacted. For the first time, it felt something, not fear, not pain, but resistance. For the first time, it was not in control. And that meant humanity had a chance. The war becomes something else. This was no longer a battle of ships and weapons. No longer a war of tactics. This was a war of fundamental truths. And humanity was reshaping the battlefield. The Supreme Commander could feel it. The Unmaker was struggling to erase them, because they had evolved beyond its reach. They were no longer just beings of flesh and mind. They were forces of will, and that meant they could fight on its level. And so, humanity did the impossible. They attacked the Unmaker's own concept of existence. They forced it to experience time. They made it feel consequence. And for the first time, the Unmaker hesitated. The turning point. The battlefield shifted. The Supreme Commander saw it. A crack in the void. A moment where the Unmaker's structure faltered. And that was all they needed. Because humanity had been waiting for this moment. They had spent 500,000 years preparing. And now, the Supreme Commander gave the final command. All forces attack. Rewrite everything. The Omega Leviathans pushed forward. Not with weapons. Not with technology. But with belief. A belief that humanity was real. That they would not be erased. That they were permanent. And the Unmaker? It began to fracture. For the first time, it was losing. The final phase begins. The Supreme Commander watched as the battlefield collapsed around them. The Unmaker was fighting back, desperate to maintain its hold on reality. But now it was not facing a fleet. It was facing a force equal to itself. Humanity was not just surviving. They were becoming something greater. And as the Unmaker screamed in defiance, the Supreme Commander spoke one last time. You tried to erase us. Now we erase you. And with that, the final battle for existence began. The war ends. The universe is changed forever. The final clash. The Unmaker was breaking. Not because it was losing a battle, not because it had been overpowered, but because for the first time in eternity, it was experiencing something it could not comprehend. Defeat. Humanity had not just resisted erasure. They had rewritten existence itself in defiance. They had forced reality to remember them. And now, they would finish the war. The Leviathans strike the killing blow. The Omega Leviathans, humanity's ultimate creations, surged forward. They did not fire weapons. They did not launch fleets. They became the attack. Merging their consciousness into the fabric of reality itself, they collapsed around the Unmaker's core. And for the first time, the Unmaker screamed, a soundless, cosmic wail of something that had never felt pain. It tried to rewrite itself, tried to erase the moment, tried to turn back time. but humanity had already blocked every path. The Supreme Commander watched it happen. They had outmaneuvered a force that had never lost. And now, they were about to erase the eraser. The last words of the Unmaker. The Unmaker, for the first time, did not strike back. It did not fight. It did not adapt. Because it knew. It understood. Humanity had done the impossible. And so, with its final moments, it spoke. Not in words, not in thoughts, but in pure understanding. And its message? You are unnatural. You are not meant to be. And yet you are. A pause. Then, I do not understand you. And that was it. The Supreme Commander gave the final order. Then you never will. And with that, humanity struck the final blow. The Unmaker's form shattered. Its presence collapsed. And in an instant, the war was over. The aftermath of the impossible. The battlefield fell silent. The Omega Leviathans, once locked in combat with a force beyond understanding, finally stopped moving. The Supreme Commander breathed out. The Unmaker was gone. Not defeated, not destroyed, but truly, completely erased. And for the first time in 500,000 years, humanity had no enemies left. What comes after the war? The Supreme Commander looked out into the void beyond existence, a place that had once been ruled by an entity that shaped all things. Now, it was empty. For the first time, the universe was truly free. But now, the question remained. What happens next? Humanity had won, but had they changed too much in the process? Had they become something greater or something worse? The Supreme Commander turned to their forces. The Omega Fleet, the Omega Leviathans, the last remnants of what was once a species that fled in exile. Now, they were the only true power left, and that meant the fate of everything was in their hands, the decision that would shape reality. Humanity had two choices. One, to return to the galaxy, to rebuild, to shape the universe into something new. Or two, to ascend beyond it, to leave everything behind, to take their knowledge, their power, and their evolution, and become something greater than mortal existence. And so, the Supreme Commander made the choice. The final decision of the human race. The words that would define the next era of reality itself. They opened the command link, broadcasting across all surviving ships, all surviving minds. And they spoke. We were born as humans. We evolved as warriors. And now, we have become something more. A pause. A moment of silence. Then, we are leaving. The departure of humanity. The decision was absolute. Humanity would not return to rule. They would not return to lead. They would not remain in the galaxy at all. They had conquered existence itself. And now, they would move beyond it. The Omega Leviathans, the last and greatest creations of the human mind, activated a final sequence. A technology that no species would ever understand. A method of traveling beyond the boundaries of all reality. And one by one, the ships vanished. Not in a hyperspace, not into another dimension, but into something else entirely. Something no being had ever reached before. A new frontier, a new existence, a place beyond time, beyond space, beyond war. And just like that, humanity was gone. The legacy they left behind. The galaxy, left in the aftermath, watched in stunned silence. The Dominion was no more. The Unmaker was erased. And humanity? Humanity had chosen something beyond existence itself. No empire, no rule, no trace of their power left behind. Only a single message, broadcast across the remaining stars. A farewell, a truth, a final warning. Do not follow us. You will not find us. You are not ready. And with that, the last chapter of humanity's war was closed. They had won. And now, they had left everything behind. The end of the old universe. For the first time in recorded history, the galaxy had no rulers, no conquerors, no warlords. Only species that had once been puppets of greater forces, now left to decide their own fate. Some would try to rebuild. Some would fight for power. But none of them would ever forget. The war that ended everything. The war that had changed the universe forever. And the species that had once been known as humans would never be seen again. The final words of the Supreme Commander. long after they had vanished, long after the last human warship had disappeared into the unknown, a single recording remained. Buried in the ruins of an old Dominion outpost, a voice, speaking one last time. We were never meant to survive, but we did. And in the end, we became more than anyone ever imagined. A pause. Then, the war is over. Let the galaxy shape its own future. We have found something greater. And with that, the message ended. The war was finished, and humanity became a legend, a force that once existed, a force that would never return. And the universe? It would never be the same. The end. The last decision, humanity's fate. The war that ended everything. The war was over. The Unmaker, the force that had threatened all of existence, was gone. Not defeated, not destroyed, erased. Humanity had achieved the impossible. They had defied the fundamental forces of the universe. And now, they had a choice: to stay or to leave everything behind. This was not just the end of a war. This was the end of humanity as it had been known. The final decision was upon them, and the Supreme Commander would make it. The question that would define eternity. The Supreme Commander stood aboard the Omega flagship, looking out over what was left. The galaxy they had once ruled, the species they had once protected, the universe they had just saved. And now, the greatest question remained unanswered. Would they return? Would they rebuild? Would they claim the universe as their own? Or would they leave? Would they move beyond? Would they take the final step into something greater? The Supreme Commander closed their eyes and made the decision, the choice to leave. The message was sent across all human forces. Every Omega warship, every Leviathan, every remaining soul that had fought in the final war. And the Supreme Commander's voice spoke one last time. We have done what no species has ever done. We have defeated the Unmaker. We have reshaped the laws of existence. A pause. Then, but we do not belong here anymore. We are not rulers. We are not conquerors. We have become something beyond. And with those words, the choice was made. Humanity would not return to the galaxy. Humanity would not rebuild an empire. Humanity was leaving. The final departure. The Omega fleet gathered. Their ships, the most advanced constructs in the universe, began the final sequence. Not a hyperspace jump, not a warp drive activation, but something else entirely. A process no other species could comprehend, because they were not traveling through space. They were leaving existence itself. The Supreme Commander gave the last command. Execute the final ascension. And one by one, the ships vanished, not into another dimension, not into the unknown reaches of the galaxy, but into something beyond reality. A place where no empire had ever gone. A place where they would be free. And just like that, humanity was gone. Forever. The galaxy watches in silence. The remaining species, the ones that had been left behind, watched in disbelief. There had been no war for control, no claim of dominance, no last attempt at conquest. Humanity had simply left. They had stepped beyond the galaxy, beyond the reach of history, beyond the understanding of mortals. And for the first time, the galaxy was truly alone. No warlords, no empires, no conquerors, just a void where humanity had once been, and a question that would echo through eternity. Would they ever return? The legacy of the forgotten titans. The galaxy tried to move on, without the Dominion, without the Unmaker, without the watchful eyes of their former rulers. But something had changed. Humanity's departure had left a mark on existence itself, a wound in the fabric of reality. The species that remained did not understand it, but they could feel it, a presence, a lingering force, like a memory that refused to fade. And in the darkest corners of the universe, in places where time itself was weakest, some claimed they saw shadows, fleeting glimpses of ships that should not exist, a presence that should not be. And though no one could prove it, no one could deny it either. That somewhere, in the farthest reaches of the unknown, humanity was still watching. The final words of the Supreme Commander. A single message remained, encoded in the deepest vaults of history. A warning, a truth. The last words of the Supreme Commander before humanity left existence behind. And they said, "We are not gone. We have only stepped beyond what you can see. We have become more than you will ever understand." A pause. Then, if you ever reach us, if you ever find what we have found, then you will know what it truly means to be free. A silence that stretched across eternity. And then, the transmission cut. The message ended. And the greatest civilization in history became a legend. Never seen again. Never heard from again. But never forgotten. And the galaxy? It would never be the same.